I'm joined by Peter Jennings, the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
My pleasure.
Now, both sides, Russian separatists and Ukraine, are blaming each other for this tragedy. Who, in your view, is the perpetrator?
I think it'll take some time to definitively prove it, but there seems to be quite a bit of evidence on the public record already that this was Russian separatists, probably using, that is to say, Ukrainian separatists probably using Russian military equipment. The Ukrainians have posted online intercepted communications of separatists talking to Russian intelligence officials. So I think that points pretty definitively to separatist and Russian involvement.
And then the question, I suppose, is why? Why do you think this plane was shot down?
Well, I think we've seen a number of Ukrainian aircraft, military aircraft, shot down in the last week, including in the last 30 hours or so, a Ukrainian fighter, an Su-25, in a similar region. And if the intercepted communications can be relied on, it would suggest that the separatists thought that what they were actually shooting at was a Ukrainian transport aircraft, which in some ways is not particularly credible because the Malaysian civil airliner was flying at a height well above what I would expect combat aircraft to be operating in. But I would suggest perhaps this has been a mistake, that they thought they were firing at a military aircraft and instead hit a civilian airliner.
Should the airliner have been in that airspace? Were the dangers of flying through this area well known?
The dangers were certainly well known, and as I say, only a matter of 12 or so hours, I believe, before the Malaysian aircraft was shot down, a Ukrainian combat fighter was shot down in a similar area. So yes, there were dangers, and I think that questions will have to be asked when we look at the causes of this incident, why it was that a civilian airliner, even at 10,000 metres, was flying over this airspace.
And once we do know definitively what's happened, and if it does turn out that it was Ukrainian separatists using Russian equipment, what practical action do you think we'll see from the world?
Well, I think a key question that has to be asked here is how closely was Russia involved in this as part of the Russian strategy to destabilise Ukraine's eastern provinces. I think we've known over the last few months since the Russian occupation of the Crimea that Russian special forces have been behind a lot of the dissent which we've seen in those Ukrainian eastern provinces. And certainly the missile technology that was used to shoot this aircraft down was a pretty complex weapons system, not the sort of thing that you would expect a local suburban militia to be able to operate effectively. So a big question is going to be, well, how closely were the Russians involved in this? And I think that will then lead to a very strong international reaction against Russian activity in the eastern provinces of the Ukraine.
What sort of action are you talking about here?
Well, I think at the very least we should see an expansion of the sanctions which have been imposed on Russia by the international community since the Crimean was occupied. And beyond that, I think we have to look at questions like whether or not Vladimir Putin should be invited to attend the G20 summit, which of course Australia will be hosting towards the end of the year. This is something which will, if the Russian connection is established, I think require a very strong response from the international community of deeper sanctions against Russia.
Foreign Minister Julie Bishop is due to meet the Russian ambassador Vladimir Morozov later today. What would she be saying to the ambassador?
Well, I think she'll be looking for some explanation of what's happened and asking questions about what it is the Russians are prepared to say at this stage about their level of knowledge and the extent of involvement. I think she should be asking about whether or not it was a Russian-supplied piece of military technology, the missile system that was used to shoot this aircraft down. And I think she should also be making clear that it's Australia's expectation and the international community's expectation that investigators are now allowed to go to the site to actually see what's taken place. So, for example, there have been reports already that the black boxes have been removed from the site and taken to Russia. Why should that be the case? Why would the Russians not be allowing the most open possible investigation of what's happened?
Well, this is the danger, isn't it? I mean, do you think Russia will be forthcoming? Do you think that they will admit to any involvement? Do you think that they will be honest about the extent of their involvement?
I think that they will probably do their best to minimise any sense of involvement, but it's going to be hard to do that because there is quite a lot of evidence already publicly available which would point to Russian fifth column special forces activities destabilising the provinces of the eastern provinces of the Ukraine. I think it'll be established pretty quickly from a variety of different means that if this was a Russian weapon system that downed the aircraft. So although we may expect blanket denials, I don't imagine the Russians will be helping, and if indeed they have been culpable. But I think a lot of the evidence already points pretty clearly in the direction of Russian involvement.
And do you think we'll see greater direct intervention in the Crimea dispute?